The winter wind howled through the quiet neighborhood, rattling loose shutters and carrying the faint scent of snow. Sarah pulled her coat tighter as she stepped into her driveway, clutching the garage key in one hand. It had been a long day, and all she wanted was the comfort of her warm bed. But as she turned the key in the lock, she froze. There, against the side of her garage, sat a man she had never seen before. His shoulders were hunched, his knees drawn up to his chest as though trying to protect himself from the biting cold. His coat was tattered, the fabric frayed and stained, and his shoes looked as though they could barely hold together another step. His beard was unkempt, and his face, worn by time and hardship, was pale from the chill. For a moment, fear pricked at Sarah's heart. She glanced around, wondering if she should call for help or simply hurry back inside. But then his eyes lifted to hers, eyes that weren't threatening, but filled with exhaustion and a quiet, pleading sadness. Without speaking, they told her a story of countless nights spent on frozen streets. Her breath caught in her throat. She hesitated, torn between caution and compassion. Then, in a soft, almost uncertain voice, she whispered, "Would you like to stay in the garage tonight? At least it's warmer than out here." The man blinked in disbelief, as though he hadn't expected anyone to show him kindness. Slowly, he nodded and whispered, thank you so much." His voice was hoarse, cracked from days of silence and cold air. Sarah felt a pang of pity in her chest. She hurried back inside, grabbed an old wool blanket from the closet, and returned to the garage with a bottle of water and a sandwich she had made earlier for her own dinner. When she handed them to him, his hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from the weight of being seen, of being treated like a human being again. He held the sandwich carefully, almost reverently, before taking the smallest bite, as though afraid it might disappear. Between mouthfuls, he murmured his gratitude over and over, each word heavier with emotion than the last. Sarah spread the blanket across a stack of folded boxes to make a makeshift bed. "It's not much," she admitted with a nervous smile. "But at least you'll be out of the wind." For the first time that night, the man's lips curved into a weary but genuine smile. "It's more than I've had in a long time," he said softly. The next morning, Sarah peeked into the garage, half expecting the man to be gone. Instead, she found him sitting neatly on the folded blanket, hands clasped in his lap as if he had been waiting. The space was surprisingly tidy. He had stacked the boxes she had moved and folded the blanket as carefully as though it were made of silk. "Good morning," she said cautiously, holding a steaming mug of coffee. His face lit up at the sight of it, and he accepted the cup with both hands, cradling it like a fragile treasure. I don't remember the last time someone offered me coffee," he admitted with a quiet chuckle. They sat on opposite sides of the garage, sipping in silence until Sarah finally asked, "What's your name?" "David," he replied. His voice, though soft, carried a depth she hadn't expected. As he spoke, she noticed the way he chose his words, calm, articulate, almost refined. He wasn't the kind of man she imagined had spent years drifting through the streets. Bit by bit, David shared fragments of his past, once an entrepreneur, once a man with family, once someone who had it all, and then lost it. His story didn't sound like excuses, it sounded like grief. And Sarah, to her surprise, found herself leaning in, wanting to know more. Sarah listened intently as David's story unfolded, though he kept many details vague, as if he didn't want to reveal too much. Still, there was something different about the way he spoke. His tone was calm, measured, almost educated. It puzzled her. How could a man who clearly carried wisdom and experience end up sleeping on a cold garage floor? What Sarah didn't know, and what David carefully kept hidden, was that his reality was far different from the picture he allowed people to see. Years earlier, David had built a thriving tech company, selling it for more money than most people could dream of. He had invested quietly, preferring anonymity over the spotlight. Despite his rugged exterior, his bank accounts were still flush with millions. But David had grown weary of shallow relationships and false smiles. After losing his wife in a sudden illness, he had stepped away from the world of wealth. He wandered, not because he had no choice, but because he longed to find something real again. Kindness that wasn't bought, compassion that wasn't tied to his money. That freezing December night, Sarah had unknowingly passed his test. In offering her garage, she had given him something money never could, proof that genuine humanity still existed. Several days passed before Sarah saw David again. She often wondered about him, half expecting to find him curled up once more in the garage. But he had vanished without a word. Part of her feared he might have slipped back into the unforgiving streets, swallowed by the cold. Then, one crisp afternoon, a knock echoed at her door. When Sarah opened it, her eyes widened in disbelief. Standing before her was David, but not the weary, ragged figure she had sheltered. His beard was neatly trimmed, his clothes tailored, his posture confident. He looked like a completely different man. "Hello, Sarah," he said with a warm smile. Her mouth fell open. "David, is that really you?" He nodded. "It's me. I owe you the truth." Sitting in her living room, David revealed everything: the company he had built, the fortune he still possessed, and his choice to step away from it all. "I've spent years wondering if people cared for who I am, not what I own," he confessed. "You offered me kindness without knowing anything about me, and that meant more than you can imagine." From his jacket, he pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. With trembling hands, Sarah unfolded the letter inside, a note of gratitude, along with a check so large it made her breath catch. Her simple act of compassion had just changed her life forever. Sarah stared at the check in disbelief, her hands trembling. It wasn't just the number written on it, it was what it represented. Her small act of kindness, something she hadn't even thought twice about, had led to a gift far greater than she ever imagined. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at David, who smiled gently, as though relieved she finally understood. "This isn't payment," he said softly, noticing her hesitation. "It's a thank you. You reminded me that there is still kindness in this world. You saw me as a person, not as a burden. That's something I can never forget." In the days that followed, Sarah's life shifted. The check helped her pay off debts, repair her home, and even start the small bakery she had always dreamed of. Yet, the true change wasn't in her finances, it was in her heart. She found herself looking differently at the people around her: the man on the corner holding a cardboard sign, the woman digging through bins behind the grocery store. She no longer saw them as strangers to avoid, but as souls carrying untold stories. Sarah learned that real wealth doesn't lie in possessions or bank accounts. It lies in compassion, in the courage to extend a hand when no one else will. She had given a stranger shelter for one night, but what she gained was a lesson for life. The smallest kindness can open the door to unimaginable blessings.